think some things have improved very markedly. There's no doubt that the speech that was given by President Obama in Cairo had the effect of making the world see him as being very caught up in the global outcomes of the whole issue of nuclear proliferation and nuclear disarmament. And I think that there has been a very substantial response to that. For example, the International Commission on Nuclear Disarmament and Nuclear Proliferation, which I took part in, and which covered countries from all over the world, particularly from Asia, Japan, Indonesia, India, Pakistan, and so forth, picked up that theme. In other words, they became conscious that this had to be not just a national response, but a global response. And I think to some extent that's happened. Another very good piece of news was that Indonesia began to take a leading position in among those countries that had decided quite deliberately not to follow a nuclear outcome. Another good piece of news was, although it took a long time to achieve, the signing of the START agreement between the United States and Russia, which has the effect, of course, of both putting a cap on the number of nuclear warheads in the respective countries, but also indeed brought about a substantial reduction. So although that was not as far as many of us wanted to go, we would have liked to see, for example, a comprehensive nuclear test ban and indeed also a fissile material cut-off, something that would stop the development of fissile materials. We haven't got those yet, but at least we seem to be on the way. One of the reasons for that, frankly, is that it's been extremely difficult to get through the US Congress. And I think the growing opposition of some members of the US Congress has not been particularly propitious. For example, the point about a fissile material cut-off is that it would not affect America very much, but it would certainly deeply discourage the development of nuclear weapons in further countries. And I hope that the Congress can start looking at it very seriously. It's also been blocked at the moment by Pakistan, a country which obviously feels it has a strong motivation to increase the scale of its nuclear stocks, though it's in some ways quite hard to see why. If we then come back to looking at the Western powers, there's been in Britain, for example, a willingness to look at how to reduce the scale and the proportions of the nuclear missiles here. And there's also been in some ways a quite encouraging development of cooperation between Britain and France, which might conceivably one day lead to only a single European defence rather than two. The other thing that I have to say on the other side, though, is that although there was a great deal of talk 2 years ago about Iran as a very dangerous new kid on the block, so to speak, there have been quite a lot of technical problems with Iran's nuclear development. I think possibly some of them engendered from outside by cyber attacks, but where they come from is not really known. And that's meant that although certainly Iran is still committed to the idea of the gradual development of, they would say, nuclear power, the argument goes on as to whether it's nuclear power or nuclear weapons. But either way, I think that development is not going to be as quick as we first supposed. Let me finally say a couple of words about the real new worries. One is a relatively limited but very real worry, and that is the rather, how can I put it, you could hardly predict the unpredictable behaviour of North Korea. We know that North Korea once again faces a very serious problem of famine. It's estimated that probably as much as a third of her population is now really on the edge of starvation. But because, in a sense, the government of North Korea has been much more connected to its military development than to its economic development, much more concerned about it and interested in it, it's quite hard to predict how the North Korean government might behave, especially when it's entered in, as it has, to a period of succession from Kim Il-sung to his son or grandson, as the case may be. So that's a worry. It's a worry because most of us can't understand the North Korean government, and it doesn't behave like most governments in the world do. The second and newest threat, brand new, I guess it's fair to say, but quite disturbing, is of course the extremely troubling information and news from Japan following the tsunami and the earthquake. And that has meant that there will be now, I think, a whole set of new doubts about civil nuclear power. the question becomes, has suddenly shifted from a concentration on military nuclear power to one on civil nuclear power. And I think what we're going to see in the next few years will be much more emphasis on how to ensure that nuclear materials are safe, that nuclear reactor structures, and I'm talking about civil nuclear power now, are completely safe, and that the dangers of radiation have been dealt with. I think what we're looking at, therefore, is a substantial setback for civil nuclear power, real problems about how to overcome that setback if one thinks one should. And that means that we're going to, I think, get a new wave of emphasis on the engineering and other aspects of how to make nuclear power safe. But my feeling, therefore, broadly is nuclear civil power, a whole new set of problems, nuclear military power, a slightly better outlook than we might have expected.